So I'd just like to thank everyone for your time and engagement today, and to all of you for coming to what I think is a fairly sentinel event in the United States, at least, where we're gathering people of different disciplines together to really network and actively talk about the future and present, and somewhat the past, but mainly the present and future of SJS, TN care, and research globally. So it's particularly warming to have patients and their families in the room. The poet John Keats said that really the only way we realize things being real is through experience, and we're gratified to have patients and their families in the room that help make this disease more real for us. I'd like to make some acknowledgements that you see on the slide there today. We've been very fortunate to have the support of the NIH and the FDA to help pull this meeting together, as well as several private funders that you see that we'd like to acknowledge. I'd also like to acknowledge my own medical center, who's really been pivotal in providing a lot of infrastructure to make this meeting happen. In terms of who's here today, you can see there's a diverse group of people, although the representation is centered in from the United States, given that this meeting is adjacent to the American Academy of Dermatology meeting. You can see there's broad representation, not only over different constituencies, as you'll see from the program, but over different geographies, anywhere from the Southern Hemisphere, Southeast Asia, to Europe and North America. And also, very important, I think, is this is a multidisciplinary group here today. Although this meeting is adjacent to the American Academy of Dermatology meeting, you can see that there is a broad constituency represented here, focused in dermatology, ophthalmology, and burns surgery, but also very much centered around research and government and other medical subspecialties. So this is going to be, I think, a very lively discussion because of that, the multidisciplinary nature. In terms of the deliverables here, I mean, this is quite a busy slide, but I think in terms of outcomes, the main outcome would be to develop a multidisciplinary network that is not only collaborative but durable, and I think perhaps durable is the key word here. And the key word to the success of the future of solving this disease, and really the ability to build and bridge not only within the US but internationally. And at the end of the day, fostering and supporting research. I mean, there's a whole bunch of outcomes that you can see there, but at the end of the day, while we're all here, is really to make outcomes better for patients in terms of preventing disease, in terms of better outcomes from disease. This is going to be a very busy meeting, a very challenging meeting. It's basically we're going from talk to talk very quickly with active discussion, and so we're not being mean when we actually have a timer, but the timer will go off at 7 minutes, a yellow light for 10-minute talks, and at 10 minutes, the yellow light will go off for 15-minute talks. The question and answer sessions will be informative and active, I think, but people will also be left maybe with not having their questions addressed. So I encourage you, and this is also in your packages, to utilize this Q&A link. It's like a REDCap survey. You can go in and you can actually ask your question. You can enter your question into REDCap. You can enter who you're directing it to, and then that question will be answered. And we plan to publish all the questions and answers to this on the website after the meeting in due course when all of these have been addressed. And then just to close, there also are a number of housekeeping issues, but these are all pretty self-apparent, hopefully, within your booklet. So if you have any questions, Michelle Mooney and Christina Williams are around. I'd also like to acknowledge the tireless efforts particularly of Christina Williams. Is Christina here? If you can stand up, Christina. She's outside the room. We'll bring her in later to formally acknowledge her, but she's had tirelessly. Christina is actually our drug hypersensitivity research nurse who actually consents SJS/TN patients, who deals directly with SJS/TN patients. And the last 6 to 12 months of Christina's life have been heavily dedicated to making this meeting a success. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Terry Manolio from the NHGRI for the next presentation. Almost to this date, on the anniversary of this date, March 3rd and 4th, 2015, Terry's vision was really integral, and the vision of the NHGRI and other NIH institutes in bringing together a meeting of key researchers in SJS/TN to really brainstorm what could be the future of SJS/TN and the key priorities in moving this forward. And Terry is going to talk to us about the successes and outcomes of that meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth, and good morning and welcome, everyone. I notice I have an 11-minute timer here, so I'm going to ignore that because I think I have 15. But if I really only have 11, you better tell me. It's a pleasure to be here. Many thanks to Elizabeth for inviting me to summarize the outcomes of our workshop. I think it's important to tell you a little bit about how we got here in terms of the National Human Genome Research Institute, not one that one would necessarily think is heavily involved in research related to an immunologic or a dermatologic disease. But as you'll hear throughout the day, this is far more than just immunologic or dermatologic. We think it's genetic. But at any rate, and my slides are advancing themselves. So let's see. So about 6 years ago now, the NHGRI, which was primarily focused, National Human Genome Research Institute, one of the 27 institutes and centers of the NIH, which was primarily focused on very basic research related to the human genome, published a new strategic plan in which it identified that we needed to not only understand the basic science of the genome, but also apply that into clinical care. And in doing that, we extended and developed a phrase or a term we referred to as genomic medicine. Others have used that term. But we defined it fairly narrowly as an emerging discipline that involves using genomic information from an individual patient in their actual clinical care. In order to sort of figure out the directions that we should go in that, one of the nice things about the NIH is that we can invite people from around the country and even around the world, as we saw in our 2015 meeting, to come and give us advice on things. And so we had a series of meetings to look at sort of what's going on in the US, how to form collaborations to address it, what stakeholders might need to be addressed, physician education, working with other federal partners, sort of an overview of what's going on around the world, and then a number of others. All of these are summarized and posted on our website. They're actually webcast, all but the first one, and you can download the slides and take a look if you like. You just Google NHGRI Genomic Medicine. But really, the genesis of the meeting I'll tell you about was from this sixth meeting back in January of 2014, where we brought together as many groups as we knew of that were using an individual patient's genomic information in their clinical care. And as you can see here, there were representatives from a large number of countries, particularly from areas sort of outside the Anglo, UK, US, Australia axis that we were delighted to have. And I think one of the reasons we're here today is because we were able to do some outreach to those countries. We heard about a whole variety of things that were going on. It was really rather astonishing to us how much was happening throughout the world. And in particular, we heard about this program that you'll hear in much more detail from Chanlapat Sukasem about genomic medicine in Thailand. And one of the big problems that they're addressing there is Stevens-Johnson toxic epidermal necrolysis. And they have pointed out or have data on the frequency of SJS/TN reactions, which we are unable to collect in the US for a whole variety of reasons. But fortunately, they have that nationwide there and the drugs that frequently cause this. They also described a very clever way for sort of intervening in this now that there have been genetic variants identified as putting people at risk for SJS/TEN that are at high frequency in Southeast Asian populations. And again, you'll hear more about that as well today. They basically implemented a pharmacogenetic card where they screen people and identify a few genetic variants that are key ones for increased risk, and then give patients a card that basically gives their name and then their the information about what variant they might have, the outcomes of the testing. So this person is at high risk of SJS/TEN from carbamazepine, and on the back is information about what that means and how you can get more information. And the patient then would give this to their physician and be aware of their risk. So this kind of captured people's imagination, and we thought, boy, what a simple solution to such a vexing problem. Does it work? And one of the wonderful things, and this is again slides from Wasan Chandratita, who works with Chalnapat in Bangkok, was the really fairly dramatic decline once this had been instituted. Now, there are a number of reasons for this decline, but among them was the use of this pharmacogenetics card. And I think we'll see updated data about that from Thailand. So this looked really quite convincing. This had been implemented nationwide because the group was also clever enough to do a cost-effectiveness analysis that showed the really tremendous cost benefit to preventing even one case of SJS/TEN. So having heard that, we thought, gee, this would be something that would be really neat to actually implement, if we could, in multiple countries, why not even globally? And the question came up, well, what's going on in the US in this particular area? It turns out that there, in talking with the various institutes that we work with and that we felt would touch on SJS/TEN, none of us really knew of very much. And we did a survey throughout the 3,000 grants that NIH funds per year, and really there was like one that was related. And part of that is because the condition is rare in the United States, thankfully, but we have a big population, so we all still see cases of it. And we thought that it might be wise then to bring together a group of external experts and international experts as well who are doing work in this area and identify what should NIH and others be doing in this field. So this was a joint effort. There was collaborative funding from the Food and Drug Administration as well as 5 other institutes of the National Institutes of Health, and we were fortunate enough to be able to host this. And our objectives really were to review the current state of knowledge, and we had a series of fabulous talks that I think are still relatively current, and so if you want to take a look again at that website, you might enjoy it. If you just if you Google NHGRI SJS/TEN, it should come up as the first thing. We also wanted to examine the role of genomics and of pharmacogenomics in etiology, treatment, and potential eradication of cases that are preventable, and then identify research gaps, unmet needs, and priorities to eliminate SJS/TEN, if possible, globally. And this is the planning group, several of whom are here today. And this is the group as a whole, a handsome group they are, to say the least. And one of the things that we did was to pull together some allele frequencies across the world, and you can see really quite different. So this is the frequency of the 5701 allele, which is a risk factor for one of the drug interactions, and then 1502. Sorry, it's 5801 and 1502. As well for carbamazepine. And you can see that there's quite a variation, but they do tend to be higher in Asian populations, and we may hear today some thoughts about why that is. But at any rate, this was useful just to begin with to sort of look at allele frequencies. So then over the course of 2 days, we identified a series of high-priority research areas. These are very wordy, bulleted text slides that I don't necessarily need to read to you. If you do Google the NHGRI SJS/TEN, they're in the executive summary from the meeting, and that's probably a better place to find them. But at any rate, one of the strongest recommendations was to develop a large international network to collect and pool large numbers of cases. that are diverse not only in ethnicity, but in implicated drugs, in stage of disease, et cetera, using standardized case definitions and standardized protocols, and to collect biospecimens, from early in the disease rather than as is often done once there's been significant desquamation and serious tissue loss. Also, there were recommendations to establish patient registries, and one that we were particularly, at least I was. I'm a general internist. I've seen one case of SJS/10, but it was the worst thing I've ever seen in my clinical career, and so that's again probably why I perked up when we heard about the Thailand program. But at any rate, was to engage burn units, since so many of these patients in the U.S. are treated in burn units, and I'm delighted that we have James Holmes and some others from the American Burn Association here with us today, and we've developed a collaboration to do some research with the Vanderbilt group in this area. So again, if you Google NHGRI genomic medicine or the NHGRI SJS/10, this should come up. There were also a series of recommendations for high priority research in the basic area in terms of identifying adequate animal models, developing novel biomarkers, identifying predictive markers, improving some of the informatics aspects of this, and identifying factors that might discriminate between people who carry the allele who develop the disease and those who don't, because there are obviously people who do have that allele and don't develop the condition when exposed to the drug. A series of clinical research recommendations, including developing a low-cost pharmacogenetic assay, and I think we may hear more about that as well. Expanding beyond sort of looking at one gene and one drug at a time to a much broader effort in drug testing, gene testing or sequencing, and looking at high-risk populations, looking at preemptive testing and the effects of prescribing alternative medications. And other clinical research topics, again, I won't read these to you. And then also pharmacovigilance and epidemiologic research, particularly on doing further and more comprehensive epidemiologic studies. Because this was an NIH workshop, we were particularly focused on doing this in the US, but there are obviously needs throughout the world for this kind of work. Show them here. So in conclusion, our conclusions of the meeting were that the successful implementation of screening is a compelling example of personalized medicine, that we could extend it to other drugs as well as other population groups and other adverse drug reactions affecting other organs, such as drug-induced liver injury or kidney injury, and that we would aim for a real reduction and potentially an eradication of SJS/10 that is genetically mediated. I should say on a personal note that having posted this workshop information on the web, I think led one of the patient advocate representatives, Paul Anderson, and their family, who are here today, to contact me, which was really very gratifying and obviously very tragic to hear from them, and we are so sorry for your loss, but we are so grateful for you to donating and advocating for research, and I think we'll hear more from you later today. And then since the meeting, we did post, as I said, the webcast on our NHGRI website. We have a white paper from the meeting that has been submitted for publication and is under review. And then this conference was a direct outgrowth of that and is supported, as Elizabeth said, from several NIH institutes. And we have a solicitation that was from a combination of NIH institutes in adverse drug reactions as well. So I think with that, that's probably my last slide. Oh, just thanks to those who helped support the meeting, as well as the planning group for it and everyone who participated in it. And I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.